I moved my TBR cart right here, so in that way I could just like pull from it, because the top shelf normally has all the books that I've planned for the month, so then that way we could just like grab and talk about them. Hey everybody, my name is Deisha and welcome back to my channel. Today I am talking about my October TBR. So October is honestly like my favorite month of the entire year, not just because it's spooky season, but here in North Carolina we also have the state fair and of course obviously the spooky season, and it's like pure like fall. Like it's not too cold, it's not too hot. Like October generally becomes like the perfect fall season for me, like once we get past like the first week. So I just love October and I love spooky season, and every single year I always have grand plans to read all these spooky books and I always never have time. And this year, honestly, this semester I had the least amount of time out of any semester that I've had so far. I had the most stuff on my plate, and like my classes are requiring the most amount of time that I've had from any classes so far. So it's a lot, and I've also been in a reading slump since July. I've talked about this in like every single video, but yeah, I've been in a reading slump since July, but there's so many books I want to get to and so many readathons I want to participate in, so I'm gonna make it work. I've also been feeling like the reading bug coming back to me the past couple of days, so I'm happy that I'm getting back in the mood to read a little bit. So hopefully that'll like overtake me and I will just be like a reader girl, because there's been a lot of times where I could have popped in an audiobook or done some reading and I just chose not to and I did something else instead. So I'm hoping that the urge to read, and like especially because I have all these spooky books on my TBR and it's like the perfect season, it'll make me read more. As I said, there are a ton of readathons in the month of October. Specifically, I'll be participating in HAILEYWEEN, which is hosted by my friend Haley Hughes. You guys obviously know and love her. We did a collab. I visited her back in the end of July, so y'all know her. And I believe her readathon is running from the 16th to the 22nd, and it is called HAILEYWEEN, but it's basically just like a time to read spooky books. She does have prompts, but she really talks about in her video that you do not have to participate in doing the prompts. It's just kind of more like vibes, but I will be doing the prompts because I'm a prompt girly. Another one I want to participate in is HALLOWEEKEND. This one's always a little weird for me because the readathon basically happens every weekend for October from Thursday night to Sunday night. Because it's supposed to be for like the weekend, for our HALLOWEEKEND. And so the first one was actually this past weekend. It started a couple days before October and is including October 1st. And I actually have not started the book, but I have one picked out that's really short. So I'm going to read that one this weekend. And then the last one I'm going to be participating in is for the Culture Readathon. This one I've actually heard of before back on my Twitter days. This one is hosted by Ty from Book Tribe. I forgot to say HALLOWEEKEND is hosted by Lexi from Books with Lexi, and there's a whole bunch of other co-hosts. But for the Culture Readathon is hosted by Ty from Book Tribe, and I heard of the readathon years ago, not years ago, but a while ago on Twitter, but I did not ever like look into who the host was. But recently I discovered Book Tribe, like I discovered her channel, and I've been loving it. She gives so many good recommendations specifically for Black books, and they are ones I've never even heard of before, and they always sound so interesting. So I've really been loving her channel. And then she came out with the announcement for the Culture Readathon for round 6, I believe this one is, and I was like, she's the person that hosts it, and you guys definitely need to check out her channel. She does not have enough subscribers. Her videos are amazing and they have so many recommendations. If you want to diversify your reading and who you're watching, please check her out. Her channel is amazing. And this round is based off of vampires, and there's a bingo board, and so I'm just gonna do one bingo and that's it. So yeah, and then also with my patrons, we are going to be having a spooky 48-hour readathon happening from the night of the 27th to the night of the 29th. So basically like actually HALLOWEEKEND, like the weekend before Halloween. At least us college students consider that HALLOWEEKEND, because that's like when all the Halloween parties are, is the weekend before or of Halloween. So we're going to be having a little 48-hour readathon, and I don't have a specific TBR set for that. Whatever books I just haven't gotten to throughout the rest of the month is when I'm going to read those. That was a lot. I hope that you guys can let that sink in, because trust me, it was a lot for me as well. And because we have all this going on and I'm still doing my spinner wheel, and I actually have to take a punishment this month, I am not doing my TBR jar. And then another reason I'm not doing my TBR jar, which if you haven't seen my TBR jar, it's just a jar that I have. It's back there. I didn't grab it because I'm not doing it this month. But it's basically a jar with all of my physical books in it, and every month I've been pulling one to try and like get through more of my physical TBR, especially the books that I'm not as excited about, but I still want to read them because I did a huge unhaul recently. So most of the books that I own I do really want to read, and so I really am trying to prioritize reading books that like are older, that I are not necessarily at the top of my TBR, but I still have an interest in them. But because there's so many readathons and everything going on this month, I've decided to not do a TBR jar. And then also, I think I've been doing it for 3 months. In the first month, I actually pulled Dark Roads by Chevy Stevens. I think for, maybe it wasn't the first month. I think I pulled this for July or August. And I started it and I was really liking it, but I just didn't make it all the way through because of obligations for like book clubs and stuff. And ever since then, I've been like, okay, here's my new TBR jar pull, but I still really want to read this one. And I've been reading all the other pulls for all the other months, but I just still have not gotten to this one. But I do really want to, because I feel like by the end of the year, if I haven't read it, I should unhaul it. But I do really want to read this one. I don't know if I'll be able to get to it in October though, because I have so many other like spooky books I really want to get to. But this one is still one that is on my TBR. What I really remember about this is it's about this young girl, and she had a dad and she was raised by him just alone. He was a single father, and he really taught her how to respect the land and to never travel this highway alone. And he is now gone, so she is now living with her aunt and her police officer husband, and he kind of like uses his badge and like his police officer status to control our main character. And I believe there's more to this plot, but that's all that I remember reading, and it did have me really interested, and I've heard good things about Chevy Stevens, so I do really want to read this one. And besides the TBR jar and the readathons, I do a spinner wheel every single month. And that was originally inspired by Kat from Cat Chats. I love her spinner wheel as well, so make sure to check her out. But a ton of people do spinner wheels. So I actually normally do my spinner wheel in the beginning of the video, but I'm going to do it at the end of the video this time, so after I talk about all of like the readathons and everything like that. But first we have to talk about my book club. I have a book club over on Patreon, and I've actually had a lot, not a lot, but a lot for me, a lot of people joining my Patreon recently. But if you do want to join, it's linked down below. It's called The Final Chapter because it's supposed to be like horror movie themed but also bookish, so that's where I got The Final Chapter. The top 2 tiers, Psychological Baddies and Slasher Queens, are the ones that participate in the book club every month, and we do a whole bunch of other things. We do reading spreads, movie nights, quarterly 24-hour 48-hour readathons. We do a lot over there. There's exclusive content. It's really, really fun, so make sure to check it out if you would like. And for this month, I was surprised, but the book that was chose was Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. I have not read a Rachel Harrison, I don't believe, but I've heard kind of mixed things. I've heard her horror is a little bit more like quirky and fun than it is like actually like horrific. So this one's about a cynical 20-something-year-old as she confronts her family's unconventional dark secrets at a, I believe it's a wedding. So this one sounds really interesting. Like it's gonna have like a lot of family, not trauma, but like a lot of family stuff in it and a lot of secrets. And I'm really excited for this one. I think there's going to be a lot to discuss, and it just came out September 19th, so we're reading a new release this month, and I'm really excited for it because I think, as I said, there's going to be a lot to discuss versus like the book that we just read for September. I feel like we're not going to have as much to discuss. We haven't had the live show yet, but I feel like there's not going to be as much to discuss, so I'm excited that we chose one that I think there's going to have a lot of like just things to talk about. First, I'm going to go over HAILEYWEEN. This is, as I said, hosted by Haley from Haley Hughes. It's taking place over the course of 1 week, and there is 5 reading prompts, but obviously, as I said, she presses the idea that you really don't have to do the reading prompts, but I am. The reading prompts are to read a queer author, read a BIPOC author, read and watch an adaptation, read a horror classic, and a book that takes place on Halloween. And I am tripling up, so I'm only reading 3 books for the readathon. So the first prompt, as I said, is to read a queer author. And for this one, I'm going to go with Transmuted by Eve Harms, which I believe is in the same series of Wind or Die as one of my favorite books of the year, Cirque Berserk. But each book in the series is written by a different author, and this one is about a trans character. That's all I really know about it, and I believe maybe some kind of like botched surgery situation, and the author herself is trans. It's kind of hard sometimes to figure out like if an author's queer or not, and like I feel a little weird like looking up, but I did figure out that Eve Harms is trans herself. I am really excited to try this one out. It's been on my radar for a little bit, and I loved Cirque Berserk so much, and I know they're by different authors, but they're like in the same series, so I think it's going to be a good one, and it's pretty short, which is why I chose it, because reading that much in a week, we'll see how that actually goes. And then for BIPOC author, read and watch an adaptation, and for a horror classic, I'm going to be reading Audition, and this is also another short one. I don't know if Audition would be considered like a horror classic, but to me, I've heard of Audition as like a classic horror movie, and it's based off the book, and it is a little bit older, the original book, so I'm going to count it for a horror classic. And the author is Asian. This is a translated work, so it counts for BIPOC as well. And there is a movie that I talked about, Audition. I have never seen it, so I plan on watching the adaptation for this one as well. For a book that takes place on Halloween, I've read so many, and I feel like there's not that many left. Maybe not so many, but I've read quite a few. And for this one, I decided to go with Autumn Crow by Cameron Chaney. And this one's on Kindle Unlimited. I believe this one's actually a collection of short stories that takes place in a town where every single day is Halloween. So it kind of is always going to fit this prompt because every day is Halloween. And I don't know much besides that, but I know a lot of people have read this book and really enjoyed it. So I'm excited, even though it's short stories, which don't always go over super well with me. And then now I'm going to talk about HALLOWEEKEND, which, as I said, is hosted by Lexi from Books with Lexi, and there's a whole bunch of other co-hosts, like literally a ton, and they're doing constant reading sprints, and they have a Discord and everything. And even though I haven't started the book for this weekend yet, I just have been loving the vibes. And so I haven't planned out which weekend I'm going to be reading every single book, because one of the books does overlap with HAILEYWEEN, so I have to read it that HAILEYWEEN weekend. But I believe for my very first weekend, this weekend, I'm going to be completing the prompt Match a Monster, which there is a wheel that they link to, and for this prompt you spin the wheel and you get a different monster, and you have to like choose a book that matches that, whether the monster is like in the book, on the cover, or anything like that. So I ended up getting Witch, and for this one I'm gonna go with Goddess of Filth by V. Castro. This one is a horror novella, and I didn't know it was a novella. I don't know much about it, but a lot of my friends have loved this one, like given it 5 stars. So I'm really excited to try this one out. Then the one that overlaps with HAILEYWEEN is Read a Book That Scares You, and for this one I'm gonna go with Audition again, just because it scares me. One, because I've heard the movie is crazy, and so I'm scared to watch the movie, which I have to do for that prompt. So if the movie's crazy, then I'm imagining the book is also crazy, and then also this is a translated work, so that also kind of scares me. Even though I've read some translated work in the past, translated work still kind of scares me a little bit. So that one I'm going to be reading over the HAILEYWEEN weekend. And so another prompt is to match a host thumbnail, and I noticed Sav has a lot of red thumbnails, so I decided to go with Tenders the Flesh. This one I would deem honestly like a modern horror classic. Everybody loves this one, and I've been meaning to read it for like the past couple months, so I definitely think it's time to get to this one. And it has a whole bunch of red on it, and Sav has a lot of red covers. Sav from Riveting Reads, if you don't know, she's one of the co-hosts. This is about a society where animal meat becomes basically like toxic and poisonous to people, and so they start to farm humans for their meat. I've heard this one has like a lot of commentary and is very lyrical and beautiful, so I'm excited to try this one out, and I think I'm really gonna like it. It's another pretty short one. I've decided to try and go with more shorter books this Halloween, but also I feel like a lot of horror is really short. There's a lot of long horror, but there's a lot of short horror as well. Another prompt is an anticipated book, and for this one I'm going to probably be doing this one the very last weekend of the month, and that is Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. I was really anticipating it because of my friend Lauren, and then also I know people love Rachel Harrison, so I definitely wanted to get to this one, and it's for my book club now, and I have it as an ARC, so it's just overall really anticipated for me. And then the last main prompt is to read a book from a host's favorite subgenre, and I can't remember who said it was one of their favorite subgenres, but someone said serial killers, so I decided to go with Go Down Hard. This one is kind of like, I don't know if it's like a romance, but I know it's about like 2 serial killers, a man and a woman, and they kind of like meet up and they figure out they're both serial killers, and now they're kind of like met their match, and like they both kind of want to like kill each other, but they're both kind of attracted to each other. And this one was recommended to me originally, or not recommended to me, but I heard about it from Kat Chats, and also Haley, and so I'm really excited to get to this one because I think it's gonna be really good. It's not on Kindle Unlimited, so I bought it on Kindle months ago with the plans to read it, and I never did, so now is finally the time. And the last readathon is for the Culture Readathon, which is hosted by Ty from Book Tribe. This is a month-long readathon. There is a whole bingo. The only thing I know for sure for this readathon is that the books have to be written by Black authors for sure, and they don't necessarily have to like fit in the prompt. Like not all the books I have on here have vampires, but it's kind of like good to like read within it. But I do have one book that fits with the vampire kind of theme. But so for one of the prompts, I don't remember, like each of the spots on the bingo board are based off a Black vampire character from pop culture, and so yeah, I don't remember which like characters these prompts are for, because I didn't actually know of all of them, but I have like which prompts are for. So for my bingo, the first prompt is blood on the cover, and for this one I'm going to go with the survival of Molly Southbourne. I read The Murders of Molly Southbourne, which is the first book in the series, I believe last year, and it was pretty good. It wasn't a fave, but it was pretty good, and it's really short. It's written by a black author, so I was enjoying it. And so this one's a sequel, and if you look at the cover, Molly has like blood dripping down her hands, so I went with that one. If you've never heard of The Murders of Molly Southbourne, the first book is about this girl named Molly, and every single time she bleeds, a duplicate clone of her appears, and the crazy thing about these clones is that they actually are all trying to kill Molly, and so she has kind of been like trained by her parents to survive and be able to kill and dispose of these extra Mollys. It's a very interesting concept, and I'm excited to continue on with the series to see what else it has going on. I haven't heard good things about the rest of the series, but I still want to try it out and see for myself. Next one is a little bit of a stretch, but it's a book with a slayer, killer, or assassin. And for this one, I'm going to go with Lone Woman by Victor Laval. I read The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval last year, the year before, and I really liked it. And this one, the main character in this, she's not really a killer, but it says that Adelaide Henry carries an enormous steamer trunk with her wherever she goes. It's locked at all times because when the trunk opens, people around Adelaide start to disappear. So I kind of counted that, but it also says the year is 1915 and Adelaide is in trouble. Her secret sin killed her parents, forcing her to flee California in a hellfire rush and make her way to Montana as a homesteader. So she said that her secret sin killed her parents, so like, and people start to disappear around her. So I was like, okay, so killer. So even though it's a stretch, I counted it for this prompt. And the last prompt for my bingo is a book about the undead. And I actually found a graphic novel called Philadelphia, which is by a black author that has to do with vampires. I don't know anything else besides it's black with vampires and it's a graphic novel. So I thought it would be perfect because I love a little graphic novel. Now for the spinner wheel, I'm not even going to go over my TBR for last month because I just don't even feel like it. Normally I go over each book, but I'm not going to do it. Let's just say I didn't complete 2 of the 5 prompts, so I'm going to take an L and do a punishment. Here goes my punishment spin. I'm really nervous for this. Okay, so it's read a book with an ugly cover. This is actually not bad, and I think I have a book on my TBR that to me has not the most cute cover, so I think I could do this one. For this one, again, I'm gonna go with Autumn Crow because unfortunately, even though I've heard good things about this book, I don't enjoy the cover. I just really don't vibe with the art style. There's nothing against Cameron Chaney. I'm sure he really put his time and effort into this cover, but for me, it's just not my favorite art style. So I'm going to go with this one for that. So we love a little double up. And now we're gonna get into the actual spins for the spinner wheel. Here goes the first spin on the spinner wheel. We have an enemies to lovers, even though I always spell enemies wrong. For this one, I got enemies to lovers, and I don't know why. Enemies is spelled wrong on the spinner wheel. I know how to spell enemies. It's missing an E, but it's just spelled wrong, and every single time I fix it, I feel like it just doesn't save, so whatever. But for this one, I'm gonna go with Go Down Hard, even though this one I don't think is directly enemies to lovers. It's like 2 serial killers that are like, both want to kill each other. So for me, that's enemies to lovers. But if I have time, I would really like to read Butcher and the Blackbird, I think is what it's called. This one is kind of like another like serial killer romance horror, and in the actual synopsis it says enemies to lovers. A lot of my friends have been reading this one recently, like Kat and Aspen, so I've been really wanting to pick it up. I've heard that it's pretty good, so if I have time I'll read it, but I probably won't, but I would like to. And now we're gonna do the second spin. Here goes the second spin. We have a queer author. This one honestly aligns really perfectly with HAILEYWEEN, and this one is to read a queer author. And so for this one, I'm just gonna go with the one that I went with for HAILEYWEEN, and that is Transmuted by Eve Harms. Now we're gonna move on to the third spin. Here goes the third spin. We have a BIPOC author, okay. This one again is literally an exact prompt for HAILEYWEEN, and that is to read a BIPOC author. And just to mix it up, I'm gonna go with Lone Woman by Victor Laval, but I have multiple books on this TBR that are by BIPOC authors, so any of these could really complete it. I could go with The Survival of Molly Southbourne, I can go with Goddess of Filth, I could really go with any of them and just overlap it, but just for now, we're gonna say this one. Next up is the fourth spin. Here goes the fourth spin. we have a nonfiction. For this one, I ended up getting a nonfiction, which I was generally gonna skip because I get one pass every single month where I can just like skip slash veto the prompt and respin. But I had one that was on my TBR for last month that I didn't finish, and that is It Came From the Closet. I did start this one, but I may restart it. And this is 25 contemporary queer and trans writers reflect on the horror films that shaped them and shook them, from Hitchcock to Halloween to Hereditary. And it is basically just like a nonfiction about these authors talking about a movie that really impacted them. That's horror. It's queer reflections on horror. So this is nonfiction, and I really wanted to like read like one a day in September, but I just didn't have the time. So I'm hoping to actually do that this month in October and read like about one a day. That way I can just get through it and like read one every single day, and I feel like that'll be like a nice like little spooky treat every single day. Next up is the fifth and final spin, and here is the fifth spin. We have my 23 books to read in 2023, which is a fine prompt, but I actually want to respin just to see if I actually want to veto this one or not, because I do get one veto a month where I get to skip one of my spins and like respin. So I'm going to respin just to see, but if I don't like it, then I'm going to do this. So here is potentially the last fifth spin. And this is a recent purchase, so I'm actually going to go with this one and not 23 books to read in 2023, because I just had that one last month, so I feel like it's not as interesting. So I'm gonna do recent purchase. So originally, as you guys saw, I got the 12 challenge one, and I had this one last month, so I decided to like veto it and respin, and I got recent purchase. And I actually went to the used bookstore recently and picked up some books that that kind of like footage is going to be on my Patreon of me going to the used bookstore. And so one that I actually picked up while I was there that I really wanted to read this month is Shiver by Junji Ito. I read Uzumaki by Junji Ito earlier this year and I adored it, so I wanted to pick up another one of his works. So I'm really excited for this one. I believe it says that it's 9 of Junji Ito's best short stories as selected by the author himself and presented with accompanying notes and commentary. So these are 9 different short stories. And unlike with Uzumaki, they were kind of like short stories but all taking place in the same town and interconnected. I don't believe these ones are interconnected, but it says it has accompanying notes and commentary, which I find really interesting. So I thought that because I saw this, I was like, okay, like that's perfect for spooky season. Like I have to read it in October, and it just happened to align with this prompt, so I'm really happy about that. That's already a lot. That's like already 12 books, but one of them is a graphic novel, one of them is a manga, and then a lot of them are like under 200 pages. So I do have a couple other like wishfuls that I wanted to quickly mention. I'm not really going to go into like the synopsis of each of them, but one of them of course is Pen Pal. Okay, this has been on my TBR literally for like the past 6 months, and there's just like no audio or anything for it, so I haven't been able to get to it, but it's about a guy who's like revisiting his childhood, and I've heard really good things about it. But Haley did say that this is like perfect to read like in fall, so I'm hoping to read this one this month or definitely like in November. Like if I don't get to this one this month, it has to be read in November, and I think it's gonna be like all my favorites of the year, so like I have to read it. Another one I really want to get to is Monstrilio. This one is one that I put on my Patreon poll last month and nobody voted for it, so I was really sad. This one is more like literary horror, and it says that it's about a boy who transforms into a monster who tries to be a man, and the people who love him in every form he takes. And it just sounds so good. Like it's about grief, I believe, and I've heard such good things. And Kayla just had this one as her book club pick for September, and I really wanted to read it. The live show has not come out yet, like they haven't had it, but I really want to read it and then watch the live show after to see everybody's thoughts. I think it's gonna be so good, and I love the cover as well, and I've just like the way that people have been talking about this book, like I need it in my life. Those are all the books on my TBR. It's a lot. It's really 12, but there's just like a lot going on. 12 to me is not crazy. 12 is like an average amount for me to read in a month. Lately, I haven't been reading 12, but it's like an average amount for me to read in a month. But we'll see if I actually get to it or not. I have no idea, bro. Like I'm gonna do my best, but we'll see. Okay, as I said, I'm also holding my 48-hour Patreon readathon, so if you want to join the Patreon, come over and read with us for HALLOWEEKEND. We would love to have you. It's linked down below. And we are doing a bingo board this time. I've never done a bingo board, but so each way to get bingo also has like at least one life prompt, so it's not like 3 prompts, but like if you want to find a book that fits every single prompt on the board, do that. If you want to just do bingo and read like one book and do one life prompt, do that. If you don't want to follow any of the prompts, you don't got to, but I just made it for fun. And that's all I have for this video today. I hope that you guys enjoyed. I think maybe down below, should we just leave like a little basic jack-o'-lantern emoji for the spooky season? I think that's what we'll do. So leave a jack-o'-lantern emoji if you made it to the end of this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I will see y'all in my next one. Bye everybody. You got the nerve to be on me, faking your life that I do. If you got